Good evening, folks. Welcome back to another Monday night live stream. Hope everybody's well. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. And I hope you've had a lovely start to your week. I can't believe we are coming up towards the end of January already. Doesn't seem 2 minutes since we were saying Happy New Year to each other. The year 2023 is definitely well underway. As is the stream tonight. We've had loads of chat already in the stream. I've been sitting here just having my hot drinks. I've got a bit of cold coming on, I think. And I've been reading the chat, kind of like going up. Wolverine, hello to you, buddy. A very, very interesting chat. And I'm going to kind of dig in a little bit and kind of answer like my feelings about some of the things you've been talking about. We'll come back to that in a second. So anyway, first of all, before that, let's have a look in the chat. Let's see who we've got and let's say hello to you fine folks. So Super Pumpkin Man, good morning or afternoon, he said. That was about 4 hours ago. I don't know if you're still around. Hello, buddy, anyway. Tolmort, nice to see you and as well, mate. Jazzcat, nice to see you. Wolverine, as I said, good evening and welcome to the chat tonight. And Wolverine, for those that haven't read the bit of chat, what Wolverine is asking for is some advice, but he wants to try other games but has no one to play with since his friends think 40k is the best and only miniatures game. And then there's a big long chat and people are kind of giving advice in bits and pieces. I'll tell you what I think in a second, but I'll see my hellos first. Type 40 Tortoise, good evening to you, my friend. Mutton Chops, good evening as well. We have also got, is it Thabs Fry? I think that's how we pronounce it. Hello, nice to see you in as well. We've got Zingbo in, good evening. We have got, as he scrolls down the chat, Christian Reeves, the legend, the man, the myth. He's in there tonight. We had a nice sort of intro session for our new D&D campaign that we did last week. So Christian's our DM and he did a fine job of that as well. Coffee and Pistachios, nice to see you in as well. He says that is one dramatic thumbnail. Surely that's the point. That's what the thumbnail should be. It should be dramatic. It should make you want to come in there, click and listen to what I've got to say. We got Yokerman as well. Good evening, Yoko. How are you doing, matey? We've got Ryan Barry. He says happy Monday. Happy Monday to you as well, mate. He's scrolling down here. We've got Camo. We've got Luke Pryor. Hello to you two fine folks. We've got VJ in as well. Good morning, mate. I know you might be a bit of a flying visit. I think you've got plans today, but welcome to the chat, mate. We've got Mark Coxey. Good evening to you, mate. Wayne Haywood. Good evening to you as well. He says another good topic for tonight. So yeah, tonight's topic, for those that don't know, it looks quite dramatic, this whole dead thing. And what I want to talk about is not just games that are like basically are dead and basically no longer played kind of thing. I want to talk about the perceptions of a dead game and is a game ever really dead and what games are still kind of like having releases but there's a perception that things are dead. I want to talk about all of that kind of stuff together. Tiny War Games, hello to you, mate. How are you doing? RPD, good evening as well. How are you? Christopher Hill, good evening. Let's scroll down a bit more here. Oh, that just jumped ahead there. I need to make sure I don't miss anybody out now. Christopher Hill, we've said. Jez Hunt, hey, good evening to you as well, mate. We've got Major Tom, good evening, Ed. We've got Frantic, good evening to you. Clyde Dashing, hello to you as well, fella. Dan, good evening. Alex Berry as well. He says, I read Andy, mate. He said, I've got me brew and Kit Kat Chunky, so ready for another great stream. Thank you very much. Well, I've got 2 cups of hot Vimto. I woke up yesterday morning, or was it? No, it was like last night before I went to bed. I woke up this morning, and my little boy's got a bit of a cold, and I think I'm starting to pick it up. So I'm trying to ward it off. I've been on the flu capsules today, lots of hot drinks, trying to kind of sort of ward it off. I've got a pretty good constitution normally. If I can catch them early, all I get is a little bit of a kind of a runny nose and they disappear quite quick. So fingers crossed, that's the plan. Let's have a little look further down as well. Dumfries Gamers, good evening to you as well, my friend. Tiny War Games, it says be more and thank you so much for the super chat, my friend. Really do appreciate that. If you haven't checked out Tiny War Games, they have some of the best gaming mats around. I will vouch for them. Have a few of them myself. Yeah, go and check them out. Some awesome mats. Colin Mack, good evening to you. Speed Demon Painting, good evening. Ross Lavery, hello to you as well, mate. We've got... Oh, I tell you what, I love it when you lot are chatting, because the more chatter comes in, it jumps up my screen dead fast, and that's a good sign. It means everybody's got loads to see, and that's what I want to see. Sora Kiss, good evening to you. Paul Ridgen, good evening to you as well. Let's have a little look. RG, good evening as well. He says, just got told off. Apparently my PC started talking. Must have been the dulcet tones of the birds. There you go, mate. That's what'll do it. Hizzy Cat Studios says, hola, boss. Good evening to you. Let's have a little look here. Because of Ben says, hello, BG. Hello, mate. How you doing, Ben? I think I can recognise from your little avatar picture there, you are Ben of On Tabletop, I think, are you? So, good evening, mate. Welcome to the chat tonight. Let's have a little look. Bit more chat there, people chatting. Thank you, Christian, as well, for sharing the link there for Tiny Wargaming. Awesome stuff. So, yes, tonight's chat, as I said before, we are... The chat tonight is about... sort of is the miniatures game you love like considered dead? And we'll get onto that main chat in a bit, but I'm not just talking about, well, the game isn't sort of supported anymore, therefore it's dead. But it's not dead if you play it. It would be dead easy just to say that. What I'm talking about is, I think there's three kind of dead games, shall we say, inverted commas, he says. There is the dead game in terms of the game's been abandoned by the manufacturer. It is no longer supported. There's no more releases coming for it. They might have lost the license. It's basically it's dead in terms of support. However, it might be that the community has picked it up and are carrying on to make some kind of like sort of community efforts for it. And if you've already got the minis, you can still play it. Let's use Warhammer Fantasy as an example. So there are dead games. Then there are what I would kind of consider as like zombie games. And zombie games are games that are technically still alive. Like basically like the company still maybe has them on their website. They maybe still sell product for that game. However, they've not released anything new for it for a long time. I would consider something like Dread Ball to be this kind of zombie game. There hasn't been anything released for it for a long time. You can still buy the starter sets. You can still buy the teams. It's still played, but there's nothing new coming for it. Anybody that picks it up now, everything's available, but it's like The Walking Dead, shall we say? It's basically it's no longer getting new stuff, but it's still alive a little bit. And then there's the game that isn't really dead. It's kind of like it maybe doesn't get a lot of support from its parent company, if you like. They don't talk about it much on social media. They might release the odd thing, like maybe like one new model every quarter or something like that. It's technically it's not a dead game. It's still supported, but because of the lack of awareness and the lack of kind of visibility of the game, people consider it to be a dead game. And it's the kind of thing when someone says, oh, I quite fancy XYZ game, does anybody play it? And the kind of thing they get back is, oh, nobody plays that, it's pretty much dead, even though it's not. So there's a perception that some games are dead or dying when really they're not. They might have kind of thriving communities in very small kind of areas that just because you're not aware of it, or there's no YouTube videos about it, or there's no Facebook activity about it, or whatever it is, just because you're not aware of it, you assume that the game is dead and buried. And those are the kind of games that we're going to be talking about later. However, first of all, I want to go back, way back in time. I want to go back to the conversation that Wolverine was having earlier on. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to clip this one out as well, because I might use this one as a kind of a separate video at some point. Because in tonight's chat, what we've got Wolverine here, who's asking for some advice. And what he said is that he's interested in trying out other games, but nobody wants to play them. His friends basically think that 40k is the best and the only miniatures war game, and therefore that's what his kind of group plays. And as I kind of scroll down through his chat as well, there's some other comments where he's saying 40k is getting way too expensive. It's hard to have other hobbies when you play 40k. And he's thinking of getting into Legion, Marvel Crisis Protocol, that kind of stuff. Now, I'm going to say something that I think is probably quite controversial, in that I don't think Warhammer 40k is overly expensive. Now, bear with me. Don't turn off. Let me clarify what I'm saying here. If you already play Warhammer 40k, you've probably already got an army, you'll have collected it for a period of time. If that's what all of your friends play and that's what you've been playing, you've probably been collecting and painting it for quite some time. In theory, you can play for free from now on. You've got your rulebook, you've got your codex, you've got your army, you've got your dice, you might have your terrain, you might have your table, or you go to a gaming club. You don't technically need to buy any more stuff to keep playing it. Games Workshop have done a really, really fantastic marketing job in convincing people that they need to buy everything that gets released for 40k. There's a new tank comes out, there's an expansion book, there's basically like new Black Library books, that there's new armies coming out, there's new models coming out. Unless those models are for the army that you play, and you really want them because you want something new to add to your army, maybe because that's your hobby kind of thing. You've paid. I'm going to say something even more controversial. Maybe you've painted everything that you have. That's pretty unlikely. But if you've built and painted everything that you have for your army, you technically don't really need to buy anything else. So it's easy to say Warhammer 40k is an expensive game. And it might be if you're just starting out, but if you're already playing it, you don't have to chase the meta. You don't have to have the latest everything else, right? That aside, if you don't want to play 40k anymore, if you've just had enough of it and you want to try something else and all of your friends are really just into 40k, then really all you need is one other person to play against. You have to kind of weigh up those options, as in, do I really love playing with this group of people more than how important the game is? Because not everybody loves 40k, but some people love playing 40k with their group of friends. Because if the game is more important than the people you play with, then technically you only need to find one more person that's interested in the same game that you're interested in, and then you've got somebody else to play. So if I take Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol as the two games that I was maybe interested in, they're both not cheap games either. Legion is another army scale game, so even though the starter box isn't that expensive, by the time you're starting from absolute scratch and buying a full-size army to play that game, you're going to be spending quite a bit of money. Probably more money than you would have spent just buying the odd thing here and there for your army for 40k. Because remember, you're not going to go into Star Wars Legion and buy all of the models. Well, technically, yeah, you might not be. Marvel Crisis Protocol, you need a lot less models to play the game, but the models are quite expensive. And it puts a lot of people off because individual models can be, in comparison to something like Warhammer 40k, a lot more expensive. The difference being you might only need 5 or 6 models to play the game. But again, what happens is it becomes part of your hobby. You're collecting, you're painting, you want to get all of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and then you want to maybe get an Asgard force, and then you want to get Avengers. Now all of a sudden you want Spider Force. That's when it starts to get expensive. And again, it can be just as expensive as Warhammer 40k. I personally spent probably in the region of about £700 or £800, not last year, the year before, collecting the Marvel Crisis Protocol minis. I absolutely love them. But that's me personally. I don't play kind of like Warhammer 40k or anything like that. And I accepted if I want to collect these to hobby with and to play with, that's how much it's going to cost. But you don't need to spend that much money. And this is where you get back to that kind of situation where, do you want a hobby? In which case, just buy the stuff that you want to paint. It doesn't really matter what game it's for. It doesn't really matter if you can't find anybody to play. Do you just want to play the game? And if so, don't get caught up in that hype of buying every single new release that comes out, because that's when it gets expensive. And if you're just enjoying playing with a group of people, maybe the game isn't actually that important. Maybe it's just the camaraderie kind of thing, the friendship, the community of having some people to talk to about the game, having people to share your love of the hobby with, and basically sort of having a game to look forward to, be that once a week or once a month or whatever it is. Maybe the game's less important. So maybe it's a bit controversial to say Warhammer's not as expensive as all that. But what I'm really saying is that don't get caught up in that need to buy every single release that comes out. That's when it gets expensive. Yes, there's certain models that are like maybe £80, £90 or $90 or $100. But they are them one-off centerpiece models. You're not buying like 5 or 6 of those. You're buying them as a nice big model for the center of your army. And if you look at other games like Conquest, for example, is another army scale game that has some very expensive big centerpiece models. If you look at Marvel Crisis Protocol, the bigger models, I've got Thanos on my table here that I've been painting. There's like the big Dormammu models. They're not cheap either, those big kind of centerpiece models. So it's not just a 40k thing. So yeah, if you really are wanting to get out of 40k and play something else, just all you need is one more person to play against. Don't worry about kind of trying to find 25 people to play against. There's plenty of events out there for the more well-known games and the more popular games. You've got to make the effort and go and look for them. So yes, that's my bit of a rant for tonight. Anyway, Big Dave, I don't think I said hello to you, Big Dave. How are you doing, mate? Let's have a little look here. What's that? RG saying 60 on and only 20 likes. We've got 82 on and there's only 36 likes. I'm sure you can give it a thumbs up, folks. If you enjoy these kind of chats, if you enjoy watching them, give it a thumbs up. You've got no idea how much it actually kind of helps out that interaction with YouTube, and that when people start clicking that like button, it starts sending it out, telling other people that the stream's happening. You'd be really surprised. Like, if you do nothing else, giving it a thumbs up really does help out. Let's have a little look here. Bit of chat going on there as well. Mini Warmod, good evening. It says dead mini game equals miniature agnostic game. There's an element of that in there. We'll come onto the dead games in a bit, but yeah, that's it. VJ saying, as much as I love IP based games, it's so insanely frustrating when you love a game and it still has plenty of scope, but the IP holder and the game company can't keep it together. It happens quite a lot with stuff, doesn't it? I mean, we've obviously got the Marvel license, which originally I think Night Models had at one point. And that seemed to kind of die a death. They couldn't seem to hang on to that, although they do still have the DC license. The Walking Dead from Mantic as well. That was a bit of a thing where basically I forget which comic book company had that now as well. It's not Image. It's not Dark Horse. I forget now, but they basically decided they wanted to end the relationship with Mantic, and Mantic wanted to keep going. The company didn't want to do it, and so it does just happen sometimes. Let's have a little look further down here as well. Oh, you know it's popular when you're getting in the spam bots. I do like that. Thanks, Christian, for sorting that out, mate. Really appreciate it. Where are we up to here? Where are we up to here? There's so much chat here. Oh, this is where we're kind of talking about the stuff I was just talking about as well, wasn't it? Red Rose Wargaming, good evening to you. How are you doing? Mini Warmut says Krabak mentioned Star Wars Imperial Assault may make a return. Fingers crossed. I'd like that, actually. It's a game I always kind of fancied playing, but by the time I was fully aware of it, I think they'd already kind of stopped making the expansions and stuff like that. Because of Ben saying, yeah, find new friends. I get. Do you know what it is? It's quite potentially one of those things where as I said before in the little kind of like monologue piece, really, like, are your friends more important than the game you're playing? Are they really your friends if they're not willing to kind of give something a try? Like if you really want to try something else and you're willing to invest in something enough for maybe 2 people to give it a try, are they really your friends if they're refusing to like sort of maybe try the fun your way kind of thing? Maybe I'm just pitching wide there. Vincent VT, good evening, mate. He's saying his favourite miniature game is Kings of War, which is alive and well. And he says he played his second Firefight game last weekend as well. It was absolutely great. Nice one. Robin Mankiller, hello, Robin. He says, I got a copy of Cursed City. You are now officially cursed. Because of Ben saying my favourite minigame is 3D printing. I'm a little bit addicted to 3D printing at the minute. More the FDM stuff at the minute. I've been printing myself some of these, which are paint pot holders for my dropper bottles. So I've gone absolutely mad and printed whole racks of those things out. I've been doing them. I've been printing stuff for the office as well here, like for the hobby room. I've been printing off little brackets to hold my laptop underneath my desk, so I can still see the screen, but it's off the desktop, out of the way. What else have I been? I've been printing little tool holders to put all my like Allen keys and snips and stuff on for the printers. I've had a bit of a rush of 3D printing stuff, so yeah. But I've not really got into the, for all I've got a resin printer, I've never really got into the printing minis bit yet. Maybe one day. Let's have a little look here. Wolverine says, I'm only starting and my friends want to go to 2,000 points and I only have 195 points. I think it depends. I mean, it really does depend upon what army you have. And it really depends upon where you want to get to. I mean, it can be expensive, but I wouldn't say like if you're going to play an army scale game, because that's what you have to factor in, is that Games Workshop, like per mini, are probably in line with most other companies. The difference is you need quite a lot of minis to play the game at 2,000 points, where if you buy Marvel Crisis Protocol, as we're talking about, you need 5 or 6 minis. Whilst it might still be like $150, something like that, it might still be $200. That's it. You're kind of done. That's all you need a little bit. But they're not cheap in comparison, like per model, if you like. Clyde saying, painted everything you have. What a joker. Yeah, I wasn't. I was assuming most people won't have painted everything. Jazzcat saying, it's why I don't play GW games. The FOMO marketing just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I think the FOMO marketing thing is you can point the finger at GW, but if you're the kind of person that gets caught up in the FOMO, you kind of have to look a bit closer to home. You got to look at yourself. Like it's in your hands. It's in your control to say no. Nobody is coming and taking that money out of your bank every month and saying, here's your new models kind of thing. You're not forced to do it. I think it's easy to point the finger at the big bad companies, but sometimes you have to kind of take responsibility for your own actions. And I appreciate there are some vulnerable people out there and not everybody can sort of cope with that kind of stuff. But for the vast majority of us, just say no kind of thing, as Ronald Reagan would have said. Yeah, because of Ben, the hobby is just expensive, yeah. But so is a drug habit. Luke says, as a Legion player, I will testify it's not a cheap game by any stretch. I love it, but it ain't cheap. I think there are very few. I'm not even going to say cheap because I don't think there are any cheap miniatures games. There are very few inexpensive miniatures games. There are things like Firefight by Mantic where you could probably buy one of their kind of starter armies for around, what are they, like 75, 80 pounds, something like that. And that's enough to be kind of playing a basic game. But again, if you want to take up to 1,500 points, you're going to have to buy more stuff. There are good starter sets like Carnivale, like Dead Zone, Marvel Crisis Protocol. I don't think is a bad value starter set, but that's what they are. They are starter sets. They're designed to get your foot in the door and to introduce you to the game and get you spending more money. All of the companies out there who sell miniatures or who have games that sell miniatures want you to keep buying miniatures. That's how they stay in business. So it's not just a GW thing. It's just that GW are the biggest. They have the money to invest in marketing and in social media and in sales tactics that maybe other companies are envious of. But yeah, at the end of the day, you need to kind of take your own responsibility for that kind of stuff. Hizzy Cat Studio says use STL proxies for 40k. I don't play organized games, so it's a non-issue. You can absolutely do that, mate. I mean, it's something I'm kind of becoming a bit more sort of open to, really. I think it's because I tend to look at games that are maybe not as popular or are kind of not the big boys. And I'm always a big believer in, if the company sells miniatures, you should kind of support them, because without a cash flow of money coming in, those games don't get made. And it's like kind of like support. It's a bit like saying, if you game at a local gaming store, buy your minis from them, because without you supporting them, they won't be there to play your games. So there's a let me just go back to this main screen here as well. So there's an element of that with miniatures companies as well. However, when it comes to Games Workshop stuff, I don't know what it is, but it feels like everybody is very much, you must use Games Workshop miniatures. And for me, unless you're playing in a Games Workshop, unless you're playing in a game store that enforces it, which I can understand why they would, if they want you to buy their models and play it in there. If you're like a garage gamer, if you're just playing kind of like games with friends at home and stuff like that, by all means, proxy stuff, by all means, sort of 3D print stuff. At the end of the day, like, it's another one of those things where it feels like everyone's conditioned to not proxy Games Workshop stuff. Quite happy doing it for other games. You know, it doesn't matter what the other games are. Like loads of people 3D print like Marvel Crisis Protocol stuff. But like, for some reason, the GW stuff seems, it's as if the community is like rallied around it and went, we're not accepting this kind of thing. And I don't like that. I don't think that's good. Joe Buddy, hello mate, how you doing? He said, saw the title and came here to see a Rune Wars miniatures game. Models are so, but damn, the game was fun. To be honest, man, it's something, and it's probably a topic for another night, but I'm starting to think it's irrelevant how good the game is these days as to whether the game hangs around or not. I think so much of the hobby is reliant upon people buying models, and if the models are not good enough, it almost doesn't matter how good the game is in a lot of instances. Wolverine said, another problem is I struggle remembering stuff, so 40k rules just really muddle me. I get that, mate. It's one of the reasons I don't play 40k. I feel like there's a lot of rules in the game that are personally not for me. Like, I prefer my games to be a little bit more straightforward and a bit more simple. I love the models, just not a huge fan of the game itself. But it sounds like you're not really interested in 40k at all, but your friends are. And if everybody's starting at the same time, that's a tough one, mate. It feels like you might just need to kind of break free from it. There's no point investing thousands and thousands of dollars or the thousands and thousands of pounds over the long term in something that you're not interested in. It's a bit different if you've been playing it and you've kind of like, you know, you're changing your mind a bit later on. Jess says, as Shakespeare said, don't believe the hype. Yes. Christian sharing the link there as well for the Patreon. Thank you very much, mate. From $2 a month. $2 for these days. What does $2 even buy anymore? That gets you into the Patreon chat. That's over on our private Discord, and you can come and chat to the BlackJack Legacy community over there as well. Catherine Smith, good evening, said, it's the siren call of a new box of sprues for me. A heavy box of unclipped plastic. I think we all succumb to that over time. I do like something new, like kind of thing, you know, like even though you've got a pile of stuff, the pile of stuff that's waiting to be done, there's something quite nice about buying something new. But it's also dangerous as well. If you're finding that it's becoming too expensive, if you're finding like I certainly wouldn't want to think that anybody was like sort of spending money they didn't have on that kind of stuff. Like self-control, like we all need to exercise it now and again. let me have a look in the chat. Excuse me while, as I said, I'm getting a bit of cold, so I've got my tissue here. Excuse me. Oh, I'll try not to be sniffing all night. Let's have a look. Let's have where are we up to here? Oh, I'll have to just dive in. Colin saying, oh yeah. Adam Tim, good evening. Says still absolutely love Godtear. Going to try and build up a group in the area. Hello, Adam. How you doing? We'll be chatting about Godtear later on. Because to be honest, part of tonight's conversation, the main topic came from a conversation I was having in the Godtear Discord group, where people were getting a bit nervous, I think, shall we say, about the future of the game. So I'll come on to that. I'm not saying that the game is dead, but people were kind of getting a bit nervous about, well, what does the future hold for Godtear? Wolverine says, what method do you use for painting? I use the putting paint on the models method. It doesn't really matter, basically. You can use whatever you want. You can use contrast paints, you can dry brush, you can be a fine artist, you can be a pro painter. It doesn't really matter, mate. If you're absolutely brand new and you're just starting out, there's some fantastic kind of beginner methods. I wouldn't I wouldn't overthink it too much. If you can pick up a brush and you can put paint on it, you're 80% of the way there. It's all just about practice and about learning it, really. Cheese Me says it's hard to be an advocate when nothing you want to play actually sticks. That's a different kind of kettle of fish, that, because it depends what you want to play and it depends on your method of approach. Because the worst thing you can do is to try and convince people who are happy playing the game they're playing that their game is basically a bag of shit, and that they should be playing your game, kind of thing. The worst thing you can do is to try and convince somebody their game is awful and they should be playing what you want to play. Like, everybody has fun in different ways. Some people love competitive play, some people love narrative play, some people just like the paint and hobby. Everybody is having fun their own way. If you're trying to be an advocate for a certain kind of game, be that Marvel, be that Legion, be that Conquest, be it Kings of War, be it Dead Zone, be it Bushido, it doesn't matter what it is. If you're trying to be an advocate for that game, sell it on its merits. Like, have the models painted up, have a nice looking board, be visible, go to the store on a regular basis, try and arrange some games with people, see if people are interested, try and do demos for them, go to different games clubs, go to different stores. Like, the worst thing you can do is just basically try and convince a group of people who are already having fun playing their game. Like, why should they change what they're doing? So I know what you mean. It's hard to do something when it doesn't stick, but why doesn't it stick? Like, is it not the game for the people that you're trying to convince? Are the people you're trying to convince already invested in something else? Because there's always like somebody for every game. Otherwise, these games wouldn't exist. Like, even the games that, like, you think, oh, like, nobody plays that. Like, if I think of something like, somebody's been talking about Burrs and Badgers in our Patreon group, they've been painting some stuff. That's not a game you see tournaments of on a regular basis. It's not something you see a lot of painted minis for online. It's not something you see people talking about or making YouTube videos. But that company, Old Sworn Miniatures, keeps going off the basis of that game. So there are enough people buying those models. So there must be enough people interested in those models. And that it's about finding the right audience for it. Like, the worst thing you can do, as I said before, is to go to a load of 40k gamers and go, oh, like, 40k is a load of garbage, you should be playing this. Because if that was me and they were telling me that, I'll say a Marvel because I've got some miniatures there, you shouldn't play a Marvel, it's a load of crap, you should be coming and playing 40k. Nothing would make me not want to play 40k more than somebody telling me that the game I play and the game I've spent money on and the game I've invested in and the game I've spent time painting my models is crap. I'd want nothing to do with them, kind of thing. So there's an approach as well. Al saying, hey all, I'm a bit late turning up. Hope everyone's well. Nice to see you, Al. Sumbling, good evening. He says, I feel like Warcry. Oh, was it? I like Warcry first edition and will not buy any stuff of second edition. If I continue building and playing with friends, it's not dead for me. Same with other games. Yeah, as I was saying before, that's not really exactly what I'm trying to talk about. Cheese Me says, FOMO is hard to avoid when you can't actually get the thing after launch. Well, maybe you don't need it. Have you thought about that? Maybe it's not that important. There are very few things that you really can't get after launch. And there are very few things that you really, really need. Like, I think we need to kind of reframe the way we think about this kind of stuff. It's plastic soldiers most of the time. Like, nothing is urgent. Nothing is a must-have. Like, at the end of the day, they're like, if companies don't want to sell the stuff, there are plenty of companies out there who are willing to sort of like do a recast of something else or sculpt something similar for 3D printing. Like, I really wouldn't like kind of get my knickers in a twist about stuff that goes out of stock. If it does, it's like, you know, like, so be it kind of thing. Like, it's really not worth getting upset about something like that. Wolverine says, I'm working on my own mini game. Nice one, mate. We Roll Dice, greetings from Ontario, Canada. Good evening. Ed says 800 points of Legion is way cheaper than 2,000 points of 40k. Is 800 points the standard game though, mate? I've got no idea these days. And I'm not suggesting that it's like that it isn't cheaper than 2,000 points, but I think like there are some armies within 40k that are cheaper than others. I watched a video recently where they basically priced everything up, and I think there were 4 armies that were like the cheapest that you could get under, was it under $500 or something like that? And there were Space Marines, there was Necrons, there was, oh, I'm trying to think now, my brain's gone. Was one of them Grey Knights maybe? And I forget what the 4th one was. But yeah, there was quite a lot of there was about like there was 4 that basically you could get 2,000 points under $500 kind of thing. And that was at list price as well. They didn't take into account any discounts. Alcini had a great game of Kill Team yesterday. Hope that game is never dead. Thabs Fry says Elder Scrolls, Call to Arms and Moonstone. What type of dead games are considered? See, I wouldn't consider either of those dead games. Like, there is new stuff comes out for them all of the time. But this is the point I was making earlier about some games are perceived to be dead because people don't see them. Like, they're not something that they kind of see on a shelf in a local store, or they don't see people playing them. So they perceive that they're dead, even though that those games have very lively and passionate communities. Big Dave says, I said I wasn't going to get any more GW stuff. That lasted 5 minutes. I bought the Heresy box and Conrad Cruise. Heresy is another one of those games that we were talking about, and we'll come back to this. But Heresy is another one of those games where everybody went nuts for it, and I don't think I've seen it played anywhere. Like, everywhere seem to have sales over the Christmas and Black Friday, selling off those Heresy boxes. And I'm sure it's really popular in certain pockets, but I don't see anybody painting the models anymore. I don't see anybody talking about playing the game anymore. I don't really see any massive, like, sort of new releases coming for the game anymore. GW almost don't talk about it anymore. Like, it's another one of those games where I'm sure it's popular, and I'm sure it has its community, but it just disappeared off a radar. Adeptus Titanicus is another one of those kind of things where they come out with a big fanfare and then kind of radio silence a little bit. Andrew Fairbanks, good evening, mate. He says GW FOMO is more of a you can get a deal on all of this. They usually come along with another, but it takes years. I know what you mean, mate, but again, unless it's for the army you play, why worry about it? Too many people seem to get themselves up in arms about, oh, there's this new box set out, and it won't be available like next week kind of thing, and if I don't get it now, I won't get it. And it's like, well, do you play that army? Do you collect it? Oh no, I don't play that army. It's like, so what do you want it for? Oh well, because it's a good deal. And it's like, so you're just getting caught up in the hype of I'm getting something a bit cheaper when you don't really need it. It's like all those kind of like buy 3 get 1 free kind of things in supermarkets and all that. It's like, I don't want 3 tins of beans, but they're on offer. and that's all that GW are doing in a different kind of a way. Yeah, Cheese me saying games only become expensive once you start buying more than your one army. And I think that's where a lot of people... This is what I mean about... If you're buying it to play the game, try and focus on one army until you get that army finished. If you're buying it because you just want a hobby, then paint the stuff that you buy and just buy whatever you want. Don't worry about the game. I just feel like over a period of, especially the last few years, I really feel like there's a bit of a shift in people's mentality that they feel like they need to have everything the minute it's released. And I know you can say about, oh, well, it might not be there in 6 months or whatever, or it might not be there in 6 weeks even if I don't get it now. But so what? Is the world going to stop turning because you didn't get that latest kind of box release or something like that? I find it a little bit weird personally. That's all. Clyde says, I have my foot in so many doors, I don't know where all these feed come from. Evil starter boxes. Because of Ben says, here in the States, this hobby is a middle class hobby. It knows this. I think a lot of hobbies are kind of like a kind of middle class hobbies, really. Like, I mean, there are not many hobbies really where you don't need to spend a lot of money. The whole point is these companies spring up to make money. It doesn't matter whether you, like, I think it's easy to point the finger at certain games and go, you need an absolute fortune, you need a load of money to play these games. However, there are games that you can play cheaper. There are games, like for example, there is the Elia Chronicles, the Drowned Earth, comes with cardboard standees in the box. And if you just want to play the game, it comes with all of the miniatures to play the game in cardboard standee format. They do sell resin and metal casts for those miniatures if you really want them, but you don't have to have them. Like, so if you just want to play a game, there's that kind of stuff. There are board games with miniatures. If you just want to play like a miniatures type game, and you can paint the models if you want to. If you just want to paint, there are cheaper ways to you can pick up second-hand models. You can buy pre-owned stuff. You could, like, things from friends and stuff like that. There are always cheaper ways to get into the hobby. So I don't think the hobby is necessarily blocking people from coming in at a low price point. It's just that everybody sees the expensive bit and goes, it's a really expensive hobby. It's like saying, I need to buy a car, but have you seen the price of Ferraris? And it's like, well, I was never going to buy a Ferrari. Like, I'm not going to be racing these cars around kind of thing. I just want a second-hand runabout. So I think there's an element of that when it comes to miniature gaming as well. I think we all need to, the entire community, we all need to kind of reframe a little bit about the price equation. If you've got the money, if you can afford it, you buy whatever the hell you want. It's your money. You do you spend it. But I think when people are talking about the cost of it as a barrier to entry for people, I think what they're saying is some games are more expensive, and that actually the hobby isn't a barrier as a cost to entry. It might be 40k, might be too expensive to go and dump all your money on a 2,000 point army all at once. There are alternatives. There are other things out there. Ed saying that the Marvel Crisis Protocol starter set gives you 2 very solid teams. You could absolutely just stick to that. You could, mate. It's one of the best value starter sets out there, in my opinion. You get terrain in there. You get all your tokens. You get all your measuring sticks. You get your dice. And you get 2 balanced full forces in there as well. So for me, I think it's a fantastic starter. And I didn't realize just how good value it was when I first started, because when I first saw it, I didn't know you got the terrain in there, and I assumed that was just a starter and you would need to buy more. I bought so many kind of Asmodee sort of Fantasy Flight type stuff over the years where you have to buy 2 starter boxes that you kind of, I was always a bit nervous about it, but it's absolutely not the case. Cheese me saying people become trapped in this need to use official bits, in part because of marketing and in part because we get conditioned to do so. I don't even think it's just about marketing, mate. I think it's a community thing. I think it's like, especially when it comes to 40k, it's almost a little bit kind of gatekeepery that puts pressure on people to not use 3D printed stuff, and they kind of turn their nose up at it a little bit. And like, it's of course Games Workshop don't want you to use it because they want you to buy their models. But if you're just playing at home, What difference does it make? Hissy Cat Studio says some miniature companies are 100% 3D print. Go search Patreon, they need love too. Some of them are, mate, to be fair, and some of them are making vast sums of money as well. Samuel Burridge, good evening. He says, my main is in slumber mode while the company focus on their newer game, which I also play, and I understand why they can only focus on one thing at a time, but it's a little dispiriting. I do know what you mean, mate, and it really is frustrating when it comes to that kind of stuff. I'll touch on that a little in a little bit when I talk more about the kind of like the dead game stuff. But yeah, I mean, not every company is as big as GW. They don't all have teams of people working on every single game. They do have to move their focus around, and unfortunately, this is what ends up happening sometimes. That games end up they don't get the love they deserve from the company, which then makes people think that it's dying. Excuse me. Vincent says historical games can't copyright their model designs, so they have to be really creative regarding rules design. Some of the most interesting rules I've read have been from World War II games. It's true, but most of these companies also have model lines and they want to sell their models. Like that's where they make their money. Like there are very few companies who kind of like support a thriving business or a stable business just off the back of books. Osprey are a bit different. They're a publishing company. That's what they do. They sell books. But like if you think about most of the miniature agnostic rule sets where they have no miniature line, they're just a rule book. They're generally kind of one person writing rules and self-publishing kind of thing, or going into partnership with someone like Modiphius or Osprey or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's generally not like a full-time business. It's more of a hobby project or a passion project, which again is fine, but it doesn't sustain a hobby industry, shall we say. Let's have a little look here. Yeah, Poor Hammer was the thing I was reading, mate. Yeah, absolutely. Mutton Chop says that the problem with Legion is it's played at 800 points, but the mission system kind of makes you want to buy more to play all the missions. I'm not that familiar with it, mate, so I wouldn't know for certain, to be fair. Frantic saying there's an article about Horus Heresy every Thursday with new stuff coming in Warhammer community. They might well be, mate. I'm not massively up on it, but again, it's one of those games I never see being played. But again, and we'll come on to this when I talk about the dead game stuff. Another game is Blood Bowl, to be fair. I never see anybody playing Blood Bowl. The only people I know playing Blood Bowl half the time are playing on the video game version. Now, I do know that there is a massive thriving community for it. But if I compare Blood Bowl like to something like, let's say, Malifaux, for me, I see more Malifaux stuff online. I see more Malifaux players. I see more Malifaux tournaments. I see more Malifaux releases. And that just shows, like, there's no way that Malifaux has as many players as Blood Bowl does. But I never see Blood Bowl being played. I never hear about anybody playing it. I never see anybody painting miniatures. So it just shows that like perception is kind of 9/10 of it, really, about whether people consider something to be a dead game or not. Ross Lavery says, you know when a middle range is not being very popular, when all the big YouTubers seem to go through a stint of using the models for teaching videos, essentially using them as practice models. Our model range is not being very popular. Using the models for teaching videos. No, I'm not sure, mate. I'm not that up on that kind of stuff. Cheese Me saying, I have to agree, FOMO is avoidable. You just got to admit that you're caught into the hype. Takes a bit of effort. It absolutely does, yeah. Ben, because of Ben saying that is the collector gene. We have a complete world. I think some people do like to collect stuff, but then you can't really kind of complain about the cost of stuff if you're somebody that is a completionist and feels they need to have everything. You kind of like you're your own worst enemy at that point. Like Simon's just saying there, Malifaux has to be on life support now. The other side really bombed, so that can't help them. Malifaux has been going for like about 12 years. Like It has new releases every month. It has plenty of competitive play, like tournaments and events. They're always releasing new stuff. There's new books coming. It's another one of those things where people like don't see it. Like Infinity, for example, Corvus Belli have survived as a company for about 15 years on the back of one game, and it's another game that you never see getting played anywhere, but it must be popular. Like, these things have their audiences. Look at Night Models with Batman miniatures game. Like, that's pretty much all they make, outside of a bit of a Harry Potter thing that kind of wasn't the most popular. But these companies keep going. I think we're in this social media age now, we assume that if we're not being bombarded by something the same way we see Games Workshop stuff, that the game is dead and buried and that we don't see it. Like, I'll come on to it, like I say in a bit, but it's like, yeah, it absolutely, it's all to do with visibility. Super Pumpkin Man says, years ago the only reason the limited release boxes were important was the handful of unique characters and models that were never re-released. Yeah, they released them all now, to be fair. Samuel Burridge says, I have to be very careful what I spend on. Has to be something I really need for my faction. Starting a new faction is a major commitment and just dilutes my money further. Yeah, it absolutely works for everybody, mate. I'm the same. I have to watch what I spend my money on. I don't make a fortune. I don't have lots of spare income. This job is great for doing something that I absolutely love and I'm passionate about. It does make me a lot of money, but so I spend my money wisely. I don't basically just go out and chase the latest hotness. Let's have a little look here. Super Pumpkin Man said, about 15 years ago, GW actually had a rule about not using proxies or third-party minis at GW stores and events. I think they still do, mate. I think most companies do. Like, it's almost a little bit disrespectful. Like if you went to your local pub and like sat down in the bar and then opened up your bag and took 4 cans out and sat and drank your own cans, I can't imagine they'd want you sitting in their pub drinking your own cans, would they? But if you're sitting in the house, you drink what the hell you like. And it's the same thing when it comes to miniatures games. Like, if you're going to go and play at GW stores, or you're going to go and play at a GW sanctioned event, there's an expectation that you use the models that they sell. But if you're just playing Garage Hammer, if you're playing at home with a friend, you know, or you're playing like a local church hall or something like that, use what you want. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference. David saying, Two Fat Lordies pretty much only sell wargaming rules. Yeah, they do, mate. And I think there's basically 2 people in that company, and I think they release rule sets on a pretty frequent basis. They're constantly sort of churning out expansions and new rule sets. That's the only reason that they keep going. I can't imagine it's like they're not employing kind of like 100 people or something like that, or even 50 people. But they don't need to if there's just a couple of them like writing rule sets. Let's have a little look further down. Rob Neal, good evening, mate. How are you doing? Gary Jensen saying, I'm too young in the hobby to have experienced a death. I'm sure it's heartbreaking. Yeah, I've not been like sort of around the hobby. Say that, it's probably been like the best part of 20 years now, to be fair, or 50, at least 15 years now. But I think at the end of the day, like, games never really die, do they? That's the whole point. What tends to die is communities, and if the communities die, that's very different. Kath, say happy birthday to Andy for me. Tony says, I have to admit I got caught in the FOMO thing for a while till I had a stern talking with myself. I'm a painty hobbyist. I can't use an army box or a troop box. Warhammer Underworlds is a different beast. Affordable painting projects. I'd agree with that, mate. When I decided, and I've said this many times before, when I decided I was going to leave my old job and come and do YouTube full time, I decided to save every penny I could get my hands on for about 6 months, so I had a bit of a buffer to kind of like to get over those early days, and I didn't spend any money on hobby stuff for 6 months, and it absolutely cured me of the kind of the FOMO, like, because I had something that was more important to me than just buying the latest thing. I was in a fortunate position. I had a good job. I had plenty of spare cash. I had plenty of disposable income. All my bills were paid. We had savings. I didn't really have to worry about what I was spending back then. And in order to to make sure I had a buffer to do this, I just stopped spending on that kind of FOMO stuff. And it was cathartic. It was really nice that, like, I got to a point where I was like, it just doesn't bother me anymore. I used to buy every Warcry release, every Kill Team release, every Underworld release. I was buying Necromunda. I was buying Silver Tower. I bought Space Hulk. I literally used to buy pretty much anything that was new because I felt like I needed it to be part of that community. I felt like I needed to buy those things to feel included in the group kind of thing. And when I stopped buying them and I stopped spending money on them, I realized it's all just a sham. Basically, you don't need to buy all that stuff to feel part of the hobby. You don't need to buy all that stuff to feel part of the community. You just need to surround yourself with positive people, and you will feel part of a hobby community. Wolverine says, "Can I email you some of my rules for my mini war games for feedback?" Unfortunately, mate, no, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I just don't have the time, mate, really, to be reading like a million rule sets and giving feedback. I get asked this quite a lot, and I don't mean it to be disrespectful, but like I don't have the time. I need to spend my spare time like basically on my own hobby, and my daytime is my work time. So yeah, unfortunately, no, mate. Mutton Chop says, Guild Ball was my heartbreaker. Sad times, the death of the community was tragic. Yeah, as I said before, I think it's the community kind of things that is the thing that basically dies a little bit. No Who says, games producers don't keep games alive, the players of the games do. Yeah, and that there is an element of that as well. And Tizzy Brain Drain says, Malifaux's a great example of how whether or not a game can seem as dead can be subjective. Absolutely, mate, yeah. And he's saying here in South Louisiana, no one really plays it, so it's seen as dead by players here. But as you say, there are many people playing it. Absolutely, mate. Yes. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go and we're going to start talking about the main topic now. So tonight's main topic is about dead games, and all the miniature games you play, are they considered to be dead? Now, I mentioned this earlier on in the live stream, but just for clarity and for folks who've come in a bit later, or if you're watching this in the rerun later on, what do I define as a dead game? And I would say that there are three types of dead games. There are games that are sort of traditionally dead. The supplier, the manufacturer, the producer of that game no longer supports it. They might not have the license anymore. The game does not get any new releases. There's no plans to update the rules or balance the armies anymore. The game is pretty much ended from a supply point of view. You can't buy the models in the shops anymore. The rules are not available to buy online. These kind of games are things like Warhammer Fantasy, which obviously ceremoniously ended quite abruptly. That said, there are still communities of people who play these games. Guild Ball is another one of these things. There are people who play these games because the communities kind of like rally around in the background. They might do some fan-made support and fan-made balancing. Maybe some people even sculpt and 3D print miniatures for these games now. But the game technically is dead in terms of it's no longer supported by the owner of the game. Now, Blood Bowl is a prime example of a game that was ended by Games Workshop, but the community would not let that game die. And a lot of companies sprung up in the background producing new teams and stuff for that game. So just because the game is technically dead doesn't mean it doesn't get played anymore. It's a game is only really dead if nobody plays it. And as I've mentioned before many times, the community, the players are what keeps a game alive, not the company necessarily that's making it. So that's one kind of definition of a dead game. The next one is what I would call like a zombie game. And these are games that are technically, The company still makes miniatures for them. They still sell the they still make miniatures for the game. They still sell miniatures for the game. They still sell the rules, but there's been no development. There's been nothing new for quite some time. So Dreadball by Mantic Games, I think, is a prime example of something like this. They have, I think, something like 20 different teams for Dreadball. You can still buy the starter sets. You can still buy the teams online. They get restocked from time to time, but there's no plans for anything new to come along, kind of thing. If you buy into that game now, everything is available for that game. So when I call them a zombie game, it's like they're kind of dead. Like, you know, like they're not getting any more love from the supplier. However, they're kind of like the Walking Dead. They're still alive in terms of they're available to buy stuff for them. And the third game, or the third type of dead game, is the game that isn't actually really dead. It's the perceived dead game. And if you notice on the thumbnail for the live stream, I put 3 games up there. One of them was War Machine, one of them was Wild West Exodus, and the other one was Godtear. And I would consider these 3 games in that kind of overarching, almost perceived to be dead kind of things. And I don't really think they're dead. Like, these games are still supported by the manufacturer. They still release new miniatures from time to time. It might not be very often. They might not talk about the games very often. It might be once every few months or something like that. However, they technically are still kind of alive and thriving games. But depending upon what your exposure to these games are, be that on social media or in a gaming store or events, or what you see people painting on Instagram or something like that, what your exposure to these games are can lead you to believe that these games are dead and gone. And the reason this topic came about was I was having this conversation in the Godtear Discord group with a group of folks in there, and people were getting a little bit worried about Godtear and about the future for Godtear. And Steamforged Games, obviously, they're heavily invested in lots of Kickstarters. We've just had the big Elden Ring Kickstarter. They've obviously got things like Dark Souls and Resident Evil and all of the other things that they've done. Bard Song, their Epic Encounters D&D packs. And Godtear seems to have kind of faded into the background a little bit. They release a new champion roughly once every 3 months, like 4 times a year. Randomly, actually, before the stream started tonight, they've teased a couple of new champions this week. Like seem to have come out of nowhere, kind of thing. They've teased a couple of new champions, but they generally don't really talk about the game that much. They don't really push the competitive play aspect. Like, you don't really see a lot of people playing the game online. You don't really see a lot of events for it. And the real passionate community of Godtear players in that Discord group were kind of in this, like, sort of having this weird conversation about, like, have we really kind of, like, have we seen everything that we're going to see, kind of thing? Are they getting ready to wind the game up? Or like, because we could really do with, like, a bit more of a push to get more new players. And I think this is one of those things, as I was saying, about the perceived dead game. Wild West Exodus, I just touched on there as well. I don't think there's been a new miniature out in about 6 months for that game, but it is still one of the mainstays of War Cradle's portfolio. They've been massively focusing on dystopian wars, and Wild West Exodus seems to have taken a bit of a backseat recently, but it is still there. There was a new starter set not that long ago, although I'm trying to think back now, it might have been about over a year ago now, but it's still supported. You just don't hear them talking about it so much. And War Machine Mark IV, new rule set coming out now. They're bringing out lots of new models, all this 3D printed stuff. But it really feels like the last roll of the dice by Privateer Press. And there's some real mixed opinions about it online. Privateer Press have been kind of taking down any negative comments from their Facebook groups. They don't want anybody sort of talking anything bad about it, which always kind of sets alarm bells ringing for me. But those are 3 games where there's a perceived kind of, is the game, like, dead, or is it dying? Is it on its last legs? Is it on life support, kind of thing? And there are many games out there. If you ignore 40k, if you ignore AOS, for example, everything else feels like it's very specific to the area you're in. What games are popular? in some locations, Warlord games, sort of bolt action might be massively popular. I never see anybody playing it. In some locations, people think Malifaux is dead, like it's on life support, it's a dead game. Elsewhere, I know there's massive tournaments for it. There's a really good tournament schedule in the UK. What weird games are always releasing new models for it. There's new factions. There was a new faction came out not that long ago. There's new books coming out on a regular basis. They update their rules on a frequency. So again, it depends upon where you are. Like Infinity is another game that Corvus Belli only really sell Infinity. It's the only game that they really sell these days. And the whole company is based upon it. If it was a dead game, that company would have went to the wall long before now. So just because you don't see these games being played doesn't mean the games are dying, and it doesn't mean the games are dead. At the end of the day, a game is only dead when people stop playing it. So it doesn't matter whether a company supports it or not. But I think as hobbyists and as people who enjoy being around a community, we want the game to be kind of talked about. We want the companies who make these games to get excited for them as well. I love Godtear. I think Godtear is a fantastic game, and it really annoys me that Steamforged seem to just almost ignore the game. Like they don't talk about it enough. Like it costs nothing to put a photograph up online. It costs nothing to make a post about it and get people excited. Where's the support for local events? Where's the support for kind of getting new players into a game? I feel like it's such a shame that these games don't get more support from the kind of the companies and the owners of those games. Like I say, they've literally just announced tonight an extra champion coming, but it'll be interesting to see how they follow that up. They've basically posted like a teaser picture of like a silhouette of the new models. But that's kind of it. So now we'll have a period of time where like the passionate people have a bit of a guess about what they think it's going to be. Then they'll tell us what those models are going to be. We'll see them, and then there'll be a bit of time, and then we'll start to see the cards coming out about what the rules are going to be. But where's the fanfare? Where's the getting people excited? Where's the painting streams? Where's the gameplay videos? Like, let's get excited about this kind of stuff. And if the companies can't get excited about it, that seems to drip feed down into the communities, and that's when people start to think, I think my game's on its way out. I'd love to know what you think. Are there any games that you kind of play now that you really think like the company could really do with a bit of a rocket up its backside and start to like shout about this game? People are starting to think that it's dead and buried, where, you know, like we've got a really kind of great local community for it. If you're a bit of a painter and a hobbyist, are they games that you really love painting the models, but there's hardly ever anything new coming out for it, and you've already bought all the stuff that you want? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to have a chat about it. So, folks, let's have a little look here and see what folks are saying. Excuse me. Tony, No Who says GW only revived Blood Bowl because they saw money in revival. Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Robin Mankiller says Curse City is a dead game with undead. Yeah. Curse City is a funny one. I'm sure that we'll never really get to the truth. I know Peachy said some stuff on the painting phase video about what happened in the background and about the releases, like how the expansions were meant to have miniatures in it, but because the game went out of stock and all that kind of stuff. I don't think we'll ever get to the absolute truth of what really happened there. But the whole thing just fell flat. It was such a shame. Cheese Me says games don't need more content for eternity. Zombie games aren't bad, I think. More games could do that with an end to the amount of new stuff they get. The thing is, mate, and this is where we might kind of disagree a little bit, is you are right. Like, if you buy a board game, you don't need to keep buying expansions. You can just play the game for what it is. But most miniatures games and miniatures company rely upon selling the actual models. They rely upon selling miniatures. And there is a collectible element to miniatures games. There is like a need to have something new. There's a hobby element to it, so you want something new to be able to paint. And that is miniatures games. It's one of the biggest difference between miniatures games and board games, is that kind of almost hobby focused collectible element. The gameplay is actually probably less important in the grand scheme of things. I think we'd be really surprised to see how few people out of everybody that buys, even if we say 40k as an example, out of all the people that buy 40k miniatures, what smaller percentage of those actually go on and play the games with them. The vast majority are just collectors and painters and model makers, really. You're right, though. Technically, they don't need more content, but that's not how business works. Yeah, Rob Neal saying card games, FFG with Conquest and Netrunner and Transformers, collectible card game, sad times. Yeah, I played Star Wars Destiny. That was another game that went that way as well. Nonja says, woohoo, actually watching a bit of this live. Nice to see you, mate. Cheese Me says, Godtear got hit hard by the pandemic, I think. There's an element of that which I completely agree with. It was released just around when the pandemic hit, and unfortunately people couldn't play the game. They couldn't get face-to-face to play it, and it really did suffer. However, you can only use that excuse for so long. We're not in that same situation now where people can't get together and play face-to-face. There are a lot of models out for that game. It's a really, really solid rule set. It's a fantastic game to play. There's loads of choice when it comes to the miniatures, like the different factions, the different war bands, if you like, the champions and the followers. There is no shortage of product available for it. But Steamforged do not shout about it. I can't remember the last time they made a video about it. I can't remember the last time that they actually publicly kind of talked about it in terms of anything other than, oh, here's the new card and here's a new model kind of thing. Like, there's no hype for it. They've just released not that long ago a new like narrative campaign type thing, and it seems to be kind of not even talking about it. It seems to have disappeared into the middle of nowhere. There's no basically like store play, like organized play type stuff. There's no events being planned. Like there's so much that they could do that they're not. They're not even engaging with like content creators and trying to get like get a little bit of buzz and a bit of noise about it. Like, there used to be podcasts for it. There was channels that would make videos about it. Like, I would love to make content about Godtear, but it's become that catch-22 of, well, there's nothing to talk about, so who the hell's going to watch it? And if nobody's watching it, who am I making the video for? So it becomes this kind of like this revolving sort of door of, like, there's nothing to talk about, so I'm not going to make a video about it. Like even as an example, today in the Warhammer community, the biggest thing doing the rounds at the minute is that there's a tank with no bottom on it. Like that it seems to be big news when it comes to Warhammer. Like, I can't believe that's news, but it's news. When it comes to any other game, if I made a video and said there's a new model come out for Godtear and there's no base on it, it doesn't come with a base, like, for example, do you think that would be news? Do you think anybody would listen to that? Do you think anybody would watch that video? It's just, I find that kind of stuff madness, but it frustrates me. I love Godtear. I think it's a fantastic game. I wish more people played it, but there comes a point where Steamforged have to take some responsibility for getting the message out there. Graham Dixon, hello mate, how are you doing? Long time no speak. He says he checked in for the first time in ages. I've more or less dropped out of the hobby the last few years, but I'm back and was really curious to see what's happening with Wild West Exodus or not. I think I kind of touched on it, mate. I mean, there was a new 2-player starter set come out with all plastic minis, really nice models in there, some lovely sculpts. I painted them all up on some painting streams when they first came out, and since Dystopian Wars came out, the ship game, it's pretty much just gone on the back burner. You never hear about it. They don't really do many blog posts about it. I've not seen any new models for it. Technically, it's still a live game. They still sell all the stuff for it. It's still a good game, that's not where their focus is at the minute. And it kind of frustrates me. There are a lot of companies do this kind of thing where they spread themselves too thin with too many different games, and they don't have the staff or they don't have the resources to basically promote everything or to talk about everything. Well, if that's the case, then maybe the game shouldn't be with them, kind of thing. No Who says, what are your thoughts on digital versions of these games via Tabletop Simulator, keeping them going? It's pros and cons, mate, to be honest. I'm glad people are enjoying the game. Godtear is a prime example. There's a big online tabletop simulator community for it. I'm glad people are enjoying playing it, but then that doesn't support the company who makes the game, so then they don't invest in it, and they don't bring out more models, and they don't bring out new starter sets, and they don't talk about it online, and they don't promote it to a wider community to try and get new people to play in it. So it's kind of catch-22. Like, it's nice that people still get to play the game because there's not enough people locally to play it, but by the same stretch, it's not supporting the long-term sustainability of the game either. Cheese Me says, negative reviews can really start a death spiral for a game, so it's not weird that companies try to limit it as best they can. I disagree. I think any company that is trying to hide bad reviews, I think that's worse than letting them get out there. Let people see for themselves whether people are liking it or not. You should never be hiding bad reviews. I think that's really disingenuous, and I wouldn't trust a company if that's what they were doing. I think unfortunately half the time it's not bad reviews that kill it. It's no news at all. It's half the bother. Ryan Barry says, Super Fantasy Brawl falls into a dead category for me. I understand Simon bought the license. I tend not to purchase Simon products for my own mental health, so it's a weird sort of dead to me. I didn't realise Simon had bought the license for that, mate. Again, it's another game. Super Fantasy Brawl, fantastic game, had the potential to be a really good sort of like store championship on like sort of competitive game, a bit like X-Wing if you like. A little bit like Magic the Gathering. Had a fantastic opportunity. Mythic Games, absolute radio silence on that game. They did the Kickstarter, they got their money, and then they basically never talked about it again. Really frustrated me, that as well. Where are we up to here? Let's just scroll ahead there. Excuse me while I scroll back and find out where we're up to here. Hizzycat Studio says, look at all of the Patreon miniature companies with 1,000 plus, some as high as 3,000 Patreons at $10 a month with monthly releases. Yeah, I get that, mate, but that's a different part of the hobby, in the same way that there are, like, look at all the painting, like the painting channels that have people like with Patreons paying to see them painting, and look at One Page Rules with all of their kind of stuff. Like, it's just another thing. Look at how many people buy Games Workshop miniatures. Look at how many people buy Mantic miniatures. It's just another avenue of it, really. Excuse me. Cheese Me says, think of a game like chess. How much new does that game really need? It's not the game that needs new stuff. There are two sides to it. One side is the company need to sell things to make money, and every time they make something new, people buy it. Why do you think Apple keep updating their iPhone? Why do you think that car companies keep updating their cars? Like, they're still just a car they just drive. Why does Rolex bring out new designs? You know, all of this kind of stuff. Companies are there to make money, and they sell stuff by making new stuff. That's just the way things are. The other side of it is, it's a hobby. We are painters, we're collectors, we love building models, we want to buy new stuff. If every game was like chess, for example, then there'd be nothing new to buy, would there? Like, it's not like that will be it. It will be done. You know, you buy your chessboard, you buy your pieces, that's it, it's done. Miniature gaming isn't the same as board gaming in terms of, I buy a box, it's self-contained, everything's in there, I don't need to buy anything more. Miniature gaming is about collecting, it's about being creative, it's about hobbying, it's about painting, it's about kit bashing, it's about sharing kind of what you've done with other people in the community. They're very different aspects. So whilst you're technically right when it comes to the game part, in theory, the game rules never need to change, do they? You don't ever need to release new miniatures. You don't ever need to release new factions. But that's not what people want. If people wanted that, they would have just bought chess. Coffee and Pistachio says, I think my perception is often falsely formed by a lack of availability by websites. I bought Bushido, might have been going out of production, but when messaging the developers, they were very passionate. I think it's a prime example, mate. A lot of these smaller games and smaller companies don't have the distribution like sort of the same way. So if you look at something like Moonstone, you won't find that for sale in a lot of shops. But you can buy it direct from the supplier. You can buy it direct from Goblin King Games. And there's a real passionate community around it. Burrows and Badges is another one of those games where you won't find it like on sale in Element Games or on sale in Wayland Games. But if you go to their website, you'll be able to buy it straight from them. And I think that sometimes there's a perception that because they're not on every store shelf in every country kind of thing, the game must be dead. But that's not it's not really the case. Luke says, was Cursivity ever really alive? Simon says, Necromunda is a zombie game that won't die and is being kept alive unnaturally. I wouldn't disagree with that, mate. Nick, 2 jokes yelling, hello mate, how you doing? He says, very late at the party, but been painting a metric crap ton of Team Yankee West Germans for the weekend. Hope everyone's well and keeping the grey at bay. I painted my first miniature on Saturday that I've painted in months. I literally haven't picked up a paintbrush in what feels like about 6 months, to be honest. I've just really not been feeling it. But my hobby room is all finished now. I've got one last thing to do tomorrow, and then I'm going to make my behind the scenes video so you can all see it, because it has reignited my passion. And I painted, let me get it off the shelf here. I painted Groot. The first model that I have painted, like I say, in about 5, maybe even 6 months. And I just sat and I put Guardians of the Galaxy on in the background, listening to that while I was kind of sitting painting. And I just did contrast paints and dry brushes and just sat and had fun with it. I knew I didn't have to replicate the paint scheme again. I absolutely loved painting it. And I can feel my passion coming back for it. Ariel Sanchez says, I've given up on Underworlds for dead, but I really like what GW is doing to jumpstart it. My Norwood box just arrived. I love the Underworld stuff. I wouldn't say I necessarily play the game, but I love those kind of small boxes, 5 or 6 models in. They're lovely little painting projects. Like, it's a cheap to get into game in terms of just like, I'll just buy this faction, like this little war band if you like, and I can get in and play it. And even the starter boxes are not that bad value either. I know they've gone up in price a little bit over the years, but even they're not bad value. I quite like Underworlds from that respect. And I like what they've done with the kind of, you don't necessarily have to sort of deck build anymore now. You can, but you don't have to. No Who says, profit takes place over enjoyment is the sad nature of society. Profit over, it's not necessarily profit over enjoyment. If people weren't enjoying it, they wouldn't be buying the stuff. So people must be enjoying it to buy the stuff. But I wouldn't disagree that there's a kind of like a capitalist kind of world that we live in. Steve says, seeing a game is dead really only seems to have the context in miniature game context. Otherwise, all board games are dead games. There could be some said about games that are not constantly expanded on. Yeah, as I said before, it's very different between board games and miniatures games. Like, board gamers still kind of get hyped for that, like the latest hotness and the new big Kickstarter and all that kind of stuff. But board games are a self-contained, I buy the board game, everything's in there to play. Like I say, they're very, very different to a miniatures game. But when it comes to miniatures game, if you're going to buy into a miniatures game and you know you're going to have to spend quite a chunk of cash on it, first thing people do is they start to look and they say, well, does anybody play this? Can I get somebody else to play against when it comes to this game? Is the game still supported? Is there new stuff coming out? Like, I'm not going to buy into a dead game, for example. Like, nobody really, like, I'm saying nobody, there's always exceptions. Very, very few people will look at Warhammer Fantasy and say, oh, that game's like been dead for years, but you can buy some bits of second-hand stuff online and stuff, I think I'll get into that. Like the majority of people, if they're looking to get into a new game, they're looking for something that has a lively community. There's loads of new models coming out for it. There's plenty to choose from. They can get games of it. There might even be tournaments or events for it. And I think that's the biggest difference when it comes to board games versus miniatures games. So it's easy to say nothing's dead, you know, like you know, maybe be better if things just came in a box. But that's what a board game is. Miniatures games are very different. VJ saying, I'm not phased about games ending, as honestly, it gives me an enforced end point for my collecting, as long as all the factions and teased game aspects are explored before they wrap it up. There's an element of that, mate, yeah. I guess what happens is generally is it happens infrequently when it comes to miniatures games, though, because what tends to happen is they come to a point where the company, basically, it's not viable. They're not making money from it anymore. So the last thing they're going to do is complete the cycle, if you like, or complete what's available, because they're not making any money. So why invest any more money in it? And that's the problem with miniatures games that are like ever expanding, if you like. Cheese Me says, Godtear really needs a kickstart to get going again, which does suck indeed. Yeah, I agree. None just saying, the one thing I do like about dead games is that you can snag the models on clearance for painting or using it in another game. I think it depends sometimes. I mean, sometimes they end up becoming very scarce because of it, and like they're very hard to pick up secondhand. Simon saying, people need to remember they are not buying a lifestyle. It's just a game as pastime. People too much into these things. I do agree with that, mate. Nothing wrong with being passionate, but like getting up in arms about something not being available or kind of thing is like, life's a bit too short for that kind of stuff. 10 Sketch, good evening to you. He says, it really saddens me, but I think X-Wing probably has a year left unless popularity drastically kicks up again. And with AMG gearing up to launch Shatterpoint, I can't see AMG caring too much either. It's a funny one because I think it was really, really popular for quite a long period of time, X-Wing. And I think it probably is still popular in certain areas. The thing with Shatterpoint is AMG were working on Shatterpoint before they were ever given like Legion and X-Wing to look after. This game's been in development for quite some time. So, yes, they're going to have a bit of a soft spot for it. They've been working really hard on it behind the scenes. And then all of a sudden they were kind of given all this other stuff to work on. It might work both ways. It might be one of those things where X-Wing's just, it's kind of, it's seen the end of the path kind of thing. Maybe sales have gone down, therefore it's not worth them investing time in it. Then they're not the size of kind of GW in terms of that. I mean, yes, they're a big company when it comes to Asmodee, the parent company, but they're not just going to throw kind of like good money after bad. I'm not that close to it. It could be massively popular and in splintered communities around the world, and that's big enough to keep it going. But it does feel like it's not as popular as it once was. Wolverine says, it took me a few hours, but I finally found some Marvel Crisis Protocol stuff. Really? It's everywhere. Cheese Me says, Catch 22 indeed. Games need a certain amount of momentum to keep on going. Yeah, you're not wrong, mate. Let's have a look. But you see, I don't ever see Godtear in bargain bins. Not sure if that is just Australia or if the game just doesn't move at retail pricing. It's quite heavily discounted, mate. You can get it most places at discount. But again, it's one of those things. If the company doesn't talk about it and they don't support stores in getting like organized play and that kind of stuff, stores are just going to sell it off. They're going to want to dump it and fill the shelves with stuff that sells. VGC need to play a Shatterpoint with Imperial Assault minis and just scale the rules. I'll be buying it. I love Star Wars. I love Marvel Crisis Protocol. Big fan of that scale of model. So yeah, I'll be buying it. Excuse me. Where was that one? Just scroll back a little bit. I'm just going to dive in. Speed Demon Payton says, for Wild West Exodus, the situation is pretty straightforward. Dystopian Wars is outselling it and not by a small amount. You can't fault a company for banking more on the big seller in these times. Yeah, I don't disagree with that, mate. I'm sure that's where their focus is. Dystopian Wars, to be fair. I mean, for all they are churning out stuff at like an absolute... I have never seen a company releasing like as much stuff as they are outside of GW. Still never see anybody playing it. I still never hear anybody talking about it generally. So it just shows it's like perceptions and stuff. Cheese Me says Moonstone has a digital version and they are using it to promote it. A lot of smaller companies do, because they just want people to try it, mate. They want people to try out the rules and see what they're like. There are so many companies who have free rules and free stats, free army builder apps, that kind of stuff. They just want people, they want to reduce the barrier or remove the barrier and get people to just try it out. No Who says if enough interest could be gathered by digital versions, maybe a digital license situation. I think you'd never get it, mate, because what happens is it's free now. If they tried to then put it behind a paywall, people would just spit their dummy out and go elsewhere, I think. Or what they do is they would create another, because I don't think you can you can't copyright game rules. You can copyright the actual imagery, but you can't copyright games rules. So technically, somebody would just do a knockoff version of it, if you like. VG saying it's great that there's a tabletop simulator version of Blitzball. Not only as it's not available in the UK, it also means I can play remotely. Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, mate. I just mean that if a game is relying upon people playing it digitally, they're not going to sell any miniatures. Cheese Me says, how many games can make it to top 5 though? There's only so many people and so much time and money to spend. Oh, I agree with that, mate. I mean, I'm not saying that every game can be like an absolute banger. Not every game is going to be sort of sell by the millions. However, like there's an element of some companies who basically like limp their games out, and it does make me wonder what's their plan for it. There are too many games which are basically just, they're put out there, or even worse, they make all their money on Kickstarter and then basically just, and I don't mind it for board games. As I said before, they're a self-contained thing, but when it comes to a miniatures game or a collectible game, I hate it when companies do, like, basically they make all their money on Kickstarter and then basically don't do anything to create you need to create a community. You need to create like a group of people who want to play the game. Simon saying Simon acquired the Super Fantasy Brawl license last month during Mythic's asset strip. I hadn't realised that had happened, mate, to be honest. I could see it. I could see it's been coming for quite some time, but I hadn't realised that it happened. VJ saying Bushido's awesome. Picked up a starter last year to play it. Nice one. Jez is saying he's been painting. Finished some roundhouses. Nice one, mate. He says glad you're out of your fug. It's nice having a nice place, mate, to kind of like to sit and hobby in. It's really kind of helped me out a bit. So we'll scroll down here a little bit more as well. Wolverine saying, are the X-Men good in Marvel Crisis Protocol? I think most of the factions are balanced, mate, to be fair, because you can pick and choose. You can essentially take anybody you want. So I wouldn't say there was anything that was massively overpowered. But that's the beauty of it. Just take the stuff that you like the look of. VG says, when it comes to board games, there really is an expectation these days that if it's successful, it'll get an expansion or a new edition. The problem is, mate, the vast majority of them, well, there's two sides. The vast majority of them, one is the vast majority come from Kickstarter, so the expansions are kind of built into the offering. The other side is, if something's selling well, why would you not like bring out an expansion or a follow-up or something like that? It's the same as like when a movie comes out and it does well at the box office, there's going to be a sequel kind of thing. Why should board games be any different? Hizzycat Studio says, your description of miniature companies need to pivot to survive. The 3D printer has changed the rules. Not really sure it has, mate. I mean, it's changed some things up, but it's not like it's not the world-ending thing for miniatures companies. I've been through this a few times before. 3D printing is about as simple as it's ever going to get, and it's still too kind of complex for some people. People don't want to handle the resin. Some people enjoy the modeling aspect of it. They like working with plastic models. I kind of feel at the minute, and I'm not saying it's reached critical mass, but I think we've kind of reached the 80% mark. So 80% of people that are going to buy like 3D printers have probably bought them. There's still the 20% left to go kind of thing. But I feel like the vast majority of people that are interested in resin printing, for printing like models and stuff, have probably already bought into it by now. But Games Workshop, their profits keep going up. Mantic are still selling models. AMG is still selling models. Weird is still selling models. All of these different companies are still selling models. So it might have slowed things down a bit, but it hasn't killed anything off. I don't think we'll ever see the bigger companies ever pivoting into 3D. As long as there is that piracy thing of I can buy this sort of STL and share it with whoever I want. As long as that still exists, I don't think we'll see the bigger companies getting into it. Evening, John. How you doing, mate? Nice to see you in. John Estel, by the way, that is. Look here. John says, did you watch the Legal Eagle review of the change of agreement for D&D creators? Yeah, you can't copyright rules was almost word for word what he said. I didn't see it, mate. No, I've not really kept up on the D&D type stuff. But I've seen these kind of things crop up in the past. Is that basically you can? It's one of the reasons Games Workshop went down the route of changing a lot of the names of their factions, so you can copyright imagery. You can copyright the way things look, like the actual. That's where the IP. You can copyright the lore and the background of that kind of thing, but you can't copyright the rules. Like there's no sort of protection around. I roll a d6 and here's the stats kind of thing. And it's one of the reasons why people have had their rules basically taken and reskinned and come out as a completely different game, but the rules are exactly the same kind of thing. So it happens more often than you'd think. But yeah, so when it comes to like sort of miniatures games digitally, you'd call it something similar, but the rules would be the same. Vijay says, could you wish Declan a happy birthday on the stream so I can show it to him later? I absolutely could, mate. Declan, happy birthday, my friend. Have a lovely day with your dad. And yeah, make sure he looks after you. Make sure he gives you a good day out. Tizzy Brain Drain says, yeah, I'm glad to hear what you got your hobby mojo back. Yeah. Wolverine says, what's your favourite Marvel movie? What's my favourite Marvel movie? That's a good question. You know what? I am quite partial to the Thor movie. I forget which one it is now. The one Ragnarok. I'm quite partial to that one. I quite like it. I am a bit of an Iron Man fan as well, I would say. The first Iron Man film kind of set the tone for everything, so I do like the old school Iron Man one. But yeah, I do like the Marvel films as well. Big Dave says, Warhammer Fantasy Battle was my game and I absolutely loved it. When GW nuked it, took a while but eventually found Kings of War. My opinion, it's a better game, streamlined and slick. I never played Fantasy Battle, so I can't say Kings of War is a better game. However, I still think Kings of War lacks a bit of, like, it's a fantastic rule set, but I think it lacks a bit of atmosphere. It needs the lore and the background, like, bringing out into it. And I feel like it's a bit of a slippery slope at the minute, like to the point now where they've taken all of the lore and the background out of the actual book and they've put it online. But like, who reads stuff online? Nobody reads stuff online. It's nice to have that book to sit and read it. Ed says, personally, I don't have the space for 3D printers as much as I would like one. That's kind of my point, mate. I think like the majority of people who want one and have the space for them have probably already got them now. I think people either don't have the space or don't want to handle the chemicals and things. No Who says interest keeps a hobby alive. Community makes more than just a simple a dancy corpse. Yeah, interest does keep a hobby alive, and if the company is creating interesting things or talking about interesting things, that motivates a community, and the community then keeps the passion alive, if you like. It's definitely a double-edged sword. David K, good evening. He says, I'm sure I'm the only one in this chat that feels this way, but I actually prefer colourful, high-quality standees and meeples to unpainted minis. Saves a lot of money as well. I think it kind of just depends, mate. A lot of people in the hobby like painting models. Like, so it's... I honestly think gaming is massively overrated. I think these companies want to believe that people are buying the models to play games with. The vast majority are just not, though. Cheese Me says that the convenience of buying the boxed minis is what keeps most people from getting 3D printing. Piracy is not the threat to big companies that they say they are. It hurts the little ones. Piracy is the threat to big companies and little companies. I think it's a threat to both of them at different extremes. Like, can you imagine if Games Workshop released an STL model for everything in their range, like their plastics would die overnight, instantly. Like, and their entire business model and their entire factory and production is built on producing their own models in plastic. Like, that would just die overnight, because like people might buy plastics for a small period of time, but then enough people would have Space Marine STLs that everybody would know somebody that had them and could print them off, and everybody would just be doing it like that. Like, there's no way big companies would get into it. Smaller companies might do it because it then negates the manufacturing stuff, and then like not enough people are that interested in it that it's being pirated and shared everywhere. Like, otherwise 3D Patreon companies wouldn't have as many subscribers, kind of things. Winter Soldier's a good choice, Wolverine, yeah. Let's have a look. Colin says Kings of War was the game that replaced Fantasy Battles. It was for a lot of folks, mate, yeah. Yeah, Cheese Me says, yeah, the lack of lore in Kings of War and Dead Zone Firefight is both good and bad. More room for your own input, but less stuff to get inspired by. Yeah, I would completely agree, mate. I need a bit of inspiration. Like, for example, I've got a load of pictures up now in this room, like framed pictures. And on this wall to my left, I've got a load of Malifaux artwork. And to this wall on the right, I've got some Marvel artwork. And then I've got some like movie poster type things over there. And those are the kind of things that inspire me. Like, because I know when I look at these pictures, I can tell you about these characters from Malifaux. I can tell you exactly who the character is. I can tell you their backstory. I can tell you who their kind of like, who their nemesis is, and who they fight alongside. Couldn't tell you any of that for like Firefight or for Kings of War. Like, I feel like the characters in the books that they've created doesn't really translate over into the game at all. Yeah, Kings of War is an example of it not being lore but an accompanying story. That's a really good way to put it, mate. Yeah. The Super Pumpkin Man says, to be honest, if I get a 3D printer, I will be printing my own creations, not minis for 40k or AOS. But I might make bits for them, but I'd rather draw something than make 3D models. Yeah, some people do it. I mean, I think sculpting your own stuff takes it to a completely different place. Like, that's a hobby in itself. Some people are really good at that. That's what folks will do, but yeah, it's not like, I don't think most folks are into that kind of stuff. Yeah, Cheese Me says everybody knows somebody who can copy their games and CDs and DVDs. The same thing happens now with STLs, mate. Like, I know loads of people who like subscribe to like Patreons and stuff like that, and just share them with each other. Like somebody will say, oh well, I'll subscribe to this Patreon and I'll share the files with you, and you subscribe to that other Patreon and you share the files with me. I know like plenty of people who do that. Like, I don't subscribe to any Patreons, and I don't use anybody else's files. I'll buy the odd file when I kind of see something that I want to print. But like I say, most of my stuff's like terrain and stuff. It's more PLA I'm interested in. And I buy things like Corvus Games Terrain. As I said before, these were free files that I printed off for dropper bottle holders. So if I get, I've been printing these off to make some like racks for these, put all my dropper bottles and stuff in. They were free on, like, so that was a free file. But yeah, I think piracy is a massive worry. It's a massive worry, especially as models are more and more expensive. Why would people not? If GW, for example, could create an STL file that says it's linked to your printer, it can't go on anybody else's printer, it's linked to your printer, and once you've printed it off, or you might get it printed 3 times, for example, to make sure it's a successful print or something like that, then that's it. It doesn't work anymore. If they could go down that route of having it protected, they might do it in the future. But yeah, absolutely no reason. Mark Zielinski, hello mate. He says, agreed. GW model STLs will be pirated from China to home hobbyists in less than a day. Absolutely, mate. It would be everywhere. Look how the codexes get shared out before they've even been released. Do you not think STL files will be everywhere in a minute? Simon says, how does Malifaux survive? It always feels like it's teetering on the edge of not being viable. It survives because people buy the stuff, mate. Like, it's like, just because you don't see it doesn't mean nobody's buying it. There's no way they could continue to release new plastic box sets month after month after month if nobody was buying them. It's bigger than you think. This is the thing with what I was talking about before, about sort of it's about perception of something. Just because your local store doesn't stock it, or nobody you know plays it locally, doesn't mean it isn't played everywhere. There's a massive events calendar for it in the UK especially, and I'm sure the US has probably even bigger ones. Like the events at Adepticon are all sold out. Like, it's a popular game. You just don't see it very often. Cheese Me says the movie industry didn't die despite how easy that stuff is to pirate. The movie industry is having a real struggle at the moment. The movie industry basically it's in a different place, not through piracy, because films still go to the cinema first, don't they? And yes, some people will want the crappy kind of DVD version or streamed version with the camera sitting at the back of the cinema and you can see people getting up and walking about and eating their popcorn. Some people will be happy with that, but the vast majority of people want to go into the cinema and see it in good quality. If they don't go to the cinema to see it, then it ends up on a streaming platform like pretty quickly. And most people don't mind paying the £5 a month, the £10 a month for something like Disney Plus or Netflix or something like that. Most people will pay that. There is still obviously there's still pirated streams and all that kind of stuff, but the music industry took a big hit. That's why you've got things like Spotify and stuff. In the same way, the PC market moved away from physical discs into things like Steam accounts, because as long as you price it right, people will ignore the piracy generally, because it's easier to get something relatively cheap. But the problem with STL stuff is, some people will just buy them. Of course, it'll be relatively successful. That's why these Patreons for all these different companies works, because enough people are willing to pay for it just because it's convenient and they can get it straight away. But there's still a hell of a lot of piracy goes on. There's a lot of people don't pirate music anymore because they stream them. They listen to them on devices that is just streamed. People generally don't pirate movies that much because they watch them on they watch them on a TV, they watch them on their phone or whatever. They're generally not of course there's this kind of IPTV and all that kind of stuff. But if you look where the main problem is, it's like football, it's boxing matches, it's pay-per-view sports. That's where the piracy is, and that's what they're trying to crank down on. If you can make it priced right, that it is more inconvenient to try and pirate it, then people will just pay the money for it. Wolverine says, what's your favourite part of the hobby? Generally, I think it's painting, mate. I do enjoy painting, although I've been through a bit of a slump lately, but I think painting's probably the bit I enjoy the most. Andrew saying, only a matter of time until the new War Machine minis get pirated. I think it depends, mate. I think at the minute, all of those STLs are held within Privateer Press, and you basically buy the printed models, don't you? Like it might as well be cast in resin as opposed to printed in resin. But it'll be only if they start to kind of share those files out to third parties. That's when it'll start to kind of break down, I think. Mark says, where do you get the Malifaux lore, rulebook and novels? I get most of it, mate. You can listen to it online. There's podcasts online. So there's a thing called the Breachside Broadcast, which is all of their kind of stories, like narrated, like audio books. So there's a lot of stuff you can get on there. And then there's huge chunks of it in their core rule books. You can go online in somewhere like Drive-Thru RPG, and you can buy the old like version 1 rule book for like, you know, like a couple of dollars, something like that, as a PDF. And it has all of the original kind of like sort of background storyline and stuff in. The core rule book has a big chunk of stuff in. Then each of the faction books have a bit more story in as well about individual factions. It's kind of spread out all over the place, really. But if you're slightly interested in it, rather than spending any money, the best way is just to go through the Breachside Broadcast on any of Spotify or any of your podcast launchers, and just go back to the start. And basically, most of the stories, the background novels, if you like, are all being recorded as audiobooks. Simon said, I don't disagree, but that's cheaper than the art and production costs. I'm not sure what we're talking about there now, mate. Colin Max says, see, the lore is there for Mantic. It's just getting time to look at it. Warhammer lore 10 years in. Fans now reading the Genevieve books would find the world unrecognizable. I think, as it was mentioned before, me, I wouldn't consider it as background lore for Mantic. It's more like it's background stories, because it doesn't carry over into the game. Like, the game's almost, it's like there's Kings of War the game, and then there's Kings of War the background, and the two don't really cross over. It's the same in the firefight stuff. Cheese me said, I think GW could survive STLs if they did price it right and offered the convenience. Nah, I doubt it, mate. I doubt it. Simon saying, GW, $1 billion company, there's no way they'd be a successful marketing to just people with 3D printers. There's that as well. I mean, the audience is tiny when it comes to that. But like I said before, their entire business model is built on making plastic models. They've invested in their own manufacturing. Most other companies haven't. So basically, most other companies don't have that like investment in machinery. They don't have like the investment in warehousing, in factories. They basically most of those other companies basically get it produced out in a third party and then get it shipped in. So they could technically move over to 3D printing because they haven't spent millions and millions of pounds on buying injection molding machines. Andrew says HBO were okay with piracy on Game of Thrones. Every 10 pirates were equal to 1 new subscription, which was way more money for them. Yeah, and I guess that works when you're relatively early in the startup kind of thing and that. But if you look at like Premier League football for now, like illegal streams are a big threat to them, and because it's so expensive, like a Sky Sports. This is another one of those things where basically Sky Sports have some of the games, BT Sport have some of the games, Amazon Prime have some of the games. Like they're split out all over the place. So if you want to watch all of the games, you've got to subscribe to lots of different things. And people go, screw that, I'll just pirate them. And that's like one of the issues. Like I subscribe to the NFL Game Pass, because outside of the US, I can get every single game through the Game Pass. So it's convenient for me to have everything in one place and just watch the games when I want. But I can imagine if, like, I'm not a massive sort of football fan when it comes to, like, sort of Premier League stuff. So I don't subscribe to any of that stuff. I don't really watch it. But I can imagine if I wanted to, if I was a big fan of it, I'd be pretty frustrated with the probably bordering on £70, £80 a month to be able to have access to all the different games. Camo was saying there, the podcasts are amazing. Hours and hours are available. Yeah, there's like years going back, years and years stuff. Andrew Fairbanks says, mention Conquest is getting a second edition. I haven't mentioned it yet, mate, but you know what? I did in the background. Let me just flick across to here. I did have this in the background there, ready to speak about. Actually, I just saw today, I've got my first demo of this game on Friday. I've never played it before. I had a demo of it way back before it was ever released. I must be going back to 2017 maybe, so I'm probably going back 6 years ago. But it's come a long way since then. The game has changed. There's a lot more models and a lot more factions available now. And Parabellum, who make this game, switched their supplier as well of the miniatures, and the miniatures are made in the Archeon Studios factory now as well in Poland. The same company that made Mantic's latest Ogre minis as well. So the quality is really sharp. They're really nice for the new models. But yeah, but they've basically, what they've done is they've essentially got a 2.0 version of it. And they've reworded some stuff to make it a little bit easier to understand. They've brought in the FAQ and any errata and stuff like that. And I think they've, as they say here, they've kind of streamlined some language. Special rules and stuff now have a standard template. There's been some minor points adjustments. And there's been like a system-wide revisit of wording, examples, diagrams, and explanations. So they've kind of just tidied the game up a little bit. So again, rules are absolutely free as well online. So here's another company who just want you to try their game out. Rules are free. So they've got a new 2-player starter set coming soon, which I must admit I do actually quite like the models in this 2-player starter set. And yeah, rules are free here. You can come on here. There's army lists, which I think there's an army builder actually that you can use, and here's the core rules and stuff as well. So the new rules are in there as well. So download that, and you can see once it opens the document. If you're just interested and you want to have a look through it, you can read through the rule book and just see what the rules are like. As you can see, there is, what's that, 111 pages, including all of the scenarios and things like that, terrain, combat, the different sequence and stuff like that. So yeah, and this is another game actually that has some really good background lore. Also, the Steamforged game Godtear, these are the two silhouettes as well. This one looks like some kind of wolf, I would suggest. Definitely some kind of beast. And the other one looks, it's hard to tell, and I can't tell if that is the same model from a different angle. Somebody said originally that they thought this one was like some kind of gorilla type thing. I think it just dawned on me there tonight. It might actually be the same model but from a different angle, because it does look like this spike on the top here. These spikes are just these spikes here. So I think it's actually the same model, interestingly, because that tail there is definitely probably that tail, isn't it? So I think people are getting excited thinking it's two different models, and I think it's the same. I think it's the same one. So yes, Conquest 2.0, and then we've got those stuff for Godtear as well. Yeah, and Simon's saying yeah, it was released today. That's right, it certainly was. Let's have a little look here. Colin says, respectfully disagree. I'm not really sure what we're talking about, mate, but yeah, that's all right. Nothing wrong with that. Wolverine, yeah, Batman's a really good game, mate. I definitely like that one as well. People having a bit of chat about the Batman world there as well. Frailty is a good game, actually. A good film, actually. I do like that one as well. Simon saying Conquest new minis are a ton better, but they need more coherent design with the factions. I find the dimensions are off and the art a little too fussy. I've not really seen a lot of them up close, if I'm honest, to comment on the scales being off. I mean, the scales are off from every other game. They are their own scale, but I don't know what they're like sort of within the game itself. And RPD saying, what is Conquest? It's a rank and flank game, mate. So it's like a mass battle game, a little bit like Kings of War, a little bit like what's it called? Warhammer Fantasy. Alpha Skag saying competes with Age of Sigmar. I wouldn't say it did, mate. It's a different kind of game. I would say it probably more competes with Kings of War, to be fair. So I think that is as good a time as any to call it to the end of the stream. So thank you, every single one of you, for coming in tonight. It's been a good couple of hours. I've managed to keep going. My hot drinks have kind of kept me steamed, kept the nose snot at bay. Thanks again, everyone who's watched. Please do check out the rest of the channel. Check out some of the other videos. There'll be more stuff coming soon as well. Now I've got this room all ready to start filming again, and I'm looking forward to some new content as well. So take care, folks. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you in the next stream. Bye.